Welcome. My name is Anne Rose Kitagawa. I'm Chief Curator of Collections and Asian Art here at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. And it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all here today to the last of our public programs associated with the special exhibition, Graphic Ideology, Cultural Revolution Propaganda from China. This is a project that came directly out of student research here at the University of Oregon. And it's a particular joy to have a number of students here today to speak with you about original work that they've done on some of the posters in the collection. I'm here just to give a little bit of background. The entire exhibition that is on view, with only one exception, was lent to us by a very important anonymous lender here in Eugene, Oregon, who has over 450 Cultural Revolution propaganda posters. And with graduate students, I was able to oversee a survey of all of them. And those original graduate students, Sangah Kim, Allie Mickle, and Kun Xie, chose a few items. I asked them to choose themes, and we did a smaller Chinese gallery rotation. And it was interesting to have these works juxtaposed with traditional Chinese art from the Neolithic through the Qing dynasties. There was enough faculty and student engagement and an interest in that exhibition that we ended up developing into a broader exhibition. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, the Chinese gallery is now temporarily a gallery of Italian Baroque textiles. So in the museum Let's Make a Deal, when I agreed to vacate the Chinese gallery in order to welcome Barberini, I said I would like to have this space. And we decided to do a broader selection of Cultural Revolution propaganda. And with that, one of the students who had helped with all of this, Esther, who I think is hiding way back there, who had helped with Glenn Wilson Charles over the summer to get the first rotation out, was involved in the reinstallation of all of this material. And so we now have over 70 objects out on view, and we were able to get a grant from the W.L.S. Spencer Foundation to involve new graduate students, because the way that museum time works, graduate students are sort of dragonflies in the larger life cycle of a museum. And our original students all up and graduated. So we were very fortunate to be able to involve a new crop of graduate students. And so we have here today to speak to you Yin-Shui Chen, Xuanting Xiong, Clay Zhou, Li Moore, Yue Chen, and Esther Weng. And we wanted to give new students an opportunity to speak about some of these objects. We were also fortunate through the W.L.S. Spencer Foundation to have the wherewithal to produce a catalog. And once again, we wanted, since we'd expanded the show, we wanted to be able to expand the student research involved with the exhibition. And so all of these brave graduate students are not only going to speak to you today, but are actually contributing short essays to the projected catalog, which alas could not happen before the show ends, but will happen sometime in 2018. So with that, I just wanted to give you a very broad sense of what you will see in the galleries. For those of you who have not been here, this special exhibition chooses themes, and the themes in general are Mao Zedong, heroes, People's Liberation Army, women, a section called Women Hold Up Half the Sky, revolutionary children, criticism, a section that has a very long name, that's actually the name of a poster, cultural performances, the international communist movements, and then we have kind of an epilogue of contemporary works that look back towards Cultural Revolution imagery. So I think with that, I'm tempted to pass the mic along to Yin-Shui. I might just say that because Yin-Shui is going to be speaking about an image of Mao that happens much later in his life cycle, the earlier exhibition installation images of Mao show an earlier Mao Zedong, and she'll be speaking about something that happened in 1976, an image from the end of his life. So with that, I'd like to pass the mic on to the first of the graduate students, History of Art and Architecture student, Yin-Shui Chen.
Hi everyone, please follow me to the poster which I'm doing my research this week. The propaganda poster serves to disseminate the Mao Zedong's thoughts and to educate the masses with the Mao's ideology. This poster is created to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the male swim in the Yangtze River. Yangtze River is a part from Changjiang between Nanjing and Shanghai City. And this poster was published in 1976, just a few weeks before Mao's death. And Mao was really good at swimming from his very young age. His first swim in Yangtze River was in 1956, and after his last swim at the same site on July 16, 1966, the Wuhan city government saved the date, July 16th, as the every year swimming festival. And Mao swam in Yangtze River for several times. Most of them was highly secured and was kept as a secret. But his swim in the Yangtze River in 1966 was widely reported and with the participation of the masses. And the title "Swimming Across the 10,000 Mile Yangtze River" was from his Mao's poem, very famous poem. And from this poem, Mao praises the changes of the modern China, and also to expresses the very historical significance of the Wuhan Yangtze River Bridge. Wuhan Yangtze River Bridge was completed in October 1957. It's the first railroad and dual-road bridge in China. And from this poster, we can see the swim festival is at the site of the wharf of Hanyang Gate in Wuchang district in Wuhan City. And we can see a lot of very young students from middle school. They participate this festival, and they raise a very big portrait of Mao, and Mao is like greeting them. And the colorful balloons and the red flags express a very happy atmosphere and to celebrate the festival. And the balloons also could help mark the swimmers and to prevent them from drowning. And the red flag represents the revolution and the socialism. Every year this festival is still held, including this year, 2017. And the swimming festival includes participants from both Chinese people and also the foreigners. So my part is finished. Thank you. Please welcome our next.
Yes. Thank you very much, Yin Shui.
So hi, I'm Yue. I'm a PhD student in the East Asian Languages and Literatures Department. So today I'm going to introduce these two posters. Both of them focus on gender equality, family planning policy, and their relations to the construction of a nation. The image of a working woman is also a focus in both posters. So let's begin with this one. So in this poster, let's begin with this one. Although we cannot figure out when were these two posters were produced, given the family planning policy was introduced in the 1970s, and the image of Prime Minister Zhou Enlai in this poster, I assume both of them perhaps were made in the 1970s during the Cultural Revolution. So Cultural Revolution, the Chinese Cultural Revolution is a catastrophe in Chinese history. Although it's not a focus in our talk today, we just cannot hardly avoid talking about it. What I want to call your attention to is the rationale of Cultural Revolution. So first, it empowers the historically marginalized groups, such as women, children, peasants, and workers. On the other hand, it disempowers the bureaucratic, the leadership, and the bourgeois. Because of this rationale, gender equality becomes a central issue in Cultural Revolution. And through these two posters, we can see gender equality is about women's personal rights, individual wills, as well as the nation's modernization and the unstopping revolutionary mission. So let's begin with this one. So in this poster, the female's role is prominent. A mother with two daughters occupies the center of this image, while the father figure is absent. So according to their glowing cheeks and sweet smiles, we can see females in the communist society enjoys a content and comfortable life. And the mother is healthy and strong, who carries a baby girl in her arms with no difficulty. This baby girl is safe and satisfied, and this older daughter is smart enough to read a book. So health, happiness, and education are highlighted in this poster. A man seems unnecessary in this narrative. However, if we interpret Chinese communism in this way, it sounds like Chinese communism sounds like radical feminism. So can a man really disappear from the communist propaganda? I hope we can find out the answer through our decoding of the message that is embedded in the use of color. So as you may know that, color red is very important in Chinese tradition. It is also salient in the revolutionary aesthetics. As you can see in some other posters in our exhibition today, all of them extravagantly use color red to champion the revolutionary passion. However, in this very one, it only employs color red as a highlighter. So we can see the use of color red in the bow knots, her clothes and shoes, the toy, the red scarf, and the last but not the least important is the title of this book. And this is a socialist hero's story, Lei Feng Diary. Actually, you can also see Lei Feng's poster in our heroes section. So, the color red is only associated with children. The very restrained use of color red effectively draws our attention to the children, the next generation, while the mother figure fades into background. While all our attentions give to these girls, their attention gives to the socialist hero. So here, I think the male hero asserts his prominent role in this narrative, while the mother is a provider of her family in the poster's contemporaneity. It is the male hero who leads the next generation to the communist future. And now let's move to the slogan section. So it says, social productivity is the most glorious. Women can also be heroes. To give birth to boys and the girls is the same. Reform traditions and create new trends. This slogan foreground gender equality and the reform of division of labor. So these 8 images illustrate the social roles that women are encouraged to take. So actually, in the communist regime, the society creates more education and job opportunities for women to get out of domestic sphere and participate in social productivity. And the free education and universal insurance also forcefully support women's career development. And there is a line here. It says this poster is commissioned by the Committee of Family Planning of Nanjing, the capital city of Jiangsu province. So now we can see the local government pays a lot of attention on gender equality and women's independence. However, while this poster foregrounds women's independence, women have to subject to the state's policy. Okay, so now let's move to the second poster that I'd like to talk today. So while this one is commissioned by a local government, this one is commissioned by People's Liberation Army. Obviously, both the political authority and the military authority intervene in people's private life. So here is a very small line in small font tells us Prime Minister Zhou Enlai with a model couple of family planning. Although it claims that the Prime Minister is with a couple, actually we see It's the prime minister with the boy and the mother, while the husband only shows his partial face in shadow. Yeah, so if one does not know this is the prime minister, one might mistake him as the husband. However, in the context of Cultural Revolution, nobody would make this mistake. But the prime minister takes much more spaces than any other figures in this poster. And his intimate relation to the boy and the mother conveys to us that the government shares will and woe with women and children. However, somehow I feel that the prime minister intervenes the family, at least composition-wise, because the father figure's body is not shown at all. I definitely do not think the prime minister personally intervened in this couple, but the government that he embodies has a lot to say in an individual's life, in the young man and the young women's marriage, as well as in family planning. So this is my introduction. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Kun Xie. I'm a PhD student from the Department of the East Asian Languages and Literature. And the poster I'm going to present today is Where to Become Like Lei Feng from a Young Age. So, give me a second, sorry. Now we look at these posters. How many pictures do you see here? Do you see how many pictures? 5, that's very good. So we have a larger middle pictures accompanied with 4 smaller pictures. And what kind of color do you perceive from this poster? Red. Yes, very good. The poster radiates a strong color of red, which simplifies the communism, the revolutionary passion, and also the aura of the Chairman Mao. But it is also important for us to understand the color of red is a preferable and auspicious color in Chinese tradition as well. And now we look at, this poster is actually was printed in 1978, about 2 years after the Cultural Revolution. But the illustration itself still promoted some ideology from the Cultural Revolution. And as we can see here, the poster actually have 13 children on the posters. And let's contemplate these children for a second. What do you notice? They are chubby, they are vigorous, healthy, well-fed. That's good. That's all good imagery about the revolution. And how about the gender? More girls than boys. Yes, majority of the children are girls, which kind of reiterate the idea what you said earlier. So it's promoting the government birth policy of having boys and having girls is the same. Instead of the traditional cultural preference of wanting a son to continue the family line. And now look at the middle picture, especially the baby. What is he doing or she doing? Yes, someone is pointing out the baby is holding a picture book have Lei Feng's portrait on it. Right? As the title already suggests, learn to be like Lei Feng from a young age, but what a child or a baby should learn from Lei Feng. So here are the very helpful for the full picture coming from. So one is to help others, enjoying the pleasure of helping others. The second is have a spirit of a nail, which means you can find all the time you can have other than your work to study to become a successful, good communist revolutionary. And then you learn from the party's traditions and to love labor work. And as we can see here, this image also represents certain things. They are the soldiers, peasants, and workers. Does anyone here know what that category represents? Well, they represent the core of Chinese proletariat. So they are the core energy to drive the communist revolution. So at this point, it's pretty much a straightforward reading of the posters, but now I would like to provide you an alternative, suggestive reading of the posters. So in Chinese traditions, people love to decorate their homes during major holidays, such like Chinese New Year's, Dragon Boat Festival, Moon Festivals. So people will go to the market to buy traditional paintings and to put it on their walls to decorating it. And one of the paintings very popular is actually the baby pictures. People, especially married couples, will purchase these baby pictures to put inside their bedroom if they have one, or somewhere close by their beds. And can anyone guess what's the purpose of that?
Fertility symbol?
Huh?
Fertility symbol?
Yes, to kind of like in order to have a baby cute like this, right? So, yes, it is actually a common practice. So the purpose of this kind of picture is for two purposes: prenatal conditioning and fetus education, which can be summarized in one Chinese word, 胎教. So for prenatal conditioning is Chinese traditional belief woman can be nourished through her visual and acoustic perceptions, which means seeing cute and vigorous baby pictures and listen to soothing music can accommodate their body for an ideal pregnancy. And for fetus education, is they believe a pregnant woman could actually mold the physical appearance and the intellectual abilities of the fetus through her visual and acoustic perceptions. So what I'm suggesting here, these posters have a similar function as this one. What it does is, it means for the part of prenatal conditioning, the woman can precondition her body to have a successful communist pregnancy. And during her pregnancy, the fetus will learn the essence of how to become Leifeng through the mother's eyes. And you may wonder why the artist cannot just paint something like this. You have to understand this poster was actually printed in 1988, 12 years after the Cultural Revolution, which the political environment was much stable than this poster, which was printed in 1978, only 2 years after. I would suggest the artists are still very aware of the political environment probably not stable, and they don't want to present anything so-called the idea of feudal, which means everything before the communist revolution, and that they could be face criminal prosecutions if they producing any feudal objects. So in conclusion, I would say the poster straightforwardly promote the idea of learning Leifeng and how to be a revolution, great revolution communist. But also, I would suggest the picture itself actually promoting this prenatal conditioning and fetus educations, which for the people, they can actually still practice their everyday belief, this everyday traditional belief, at the same time with a flair of communist revolution teachings. And why I see it as a win-win solution for both the people and the party. Thank you.
Great. So my name is Lee Moore. I'm a fourth year PhD student in the East Asian Languages and Literature program. I'm doing Chinese literature and museums. I wanted to talk about this poster really quickly. So this poster is an example of a highly allegorized image that is meant to bolster the Communist Party's legitimacy using images of the PRC's ethnic minorities. It uses multiple tropes associated with the representation of ethnic minorities within the PRC, but it does not appear to actually represent ethnic minorities or attempt to represent ethnic minorities in any authentic way. My argument is essentially that it instead orientalizes them, marking them as a kind of ethnic other and feminizing and even, I'll argue, Arabizing them. So keep in mind this poster was made in 1963. So there are, in terms of why this representation legitimizes the Communist Party, one factor is that at the same time the United States was struggling with its own ethnic issues. And so by presenting the party, the Chinese Communist Party, as the center of this kind of glorious ethnic revival, they achieved a kind of legitimacy. So I just want to walk through and focus on a couple of things really quickly. So right here, you have, at the center of the poster, you have peaches. Now, peaches are interesting because they're a kind of fruit that is often associated with ethnic minorities in the PRC, but more interesting to me is the fact that peaches don't grow in any areas with ethnic minorities. Peaches have a long history in China. They are they're first cultivated in China in the lower Yangtze River Valley, but they do not, as far as I have been able to find, have a range anywhere in the areas predominated by ethnic minorities. So peaches are associated with longevity, and there are lots of other fruit images that are associated with ethnic minorities. Lots of other images in socialist China show ethnic minorities bringing fruit. In fact, I'm going to pass on those two. Or if you could turn them up. So we'll pass this around after in a second, but one of the things that's interesting, so this is an image from 1983, a poster. So this is post-Cultural Revolution, but you can see this is a Tibetan family. So this man looks almost exactly the same as this gentleman here in terms of costume, but you have a lot of similar elements to this poster. So you have peaches here. Peaches do not grow in Tibet. You have a similar kind of rug right here, and you also have this kind of fantasy element to it. These two women in the side here appear to be coming from some sort of fantasy land. And so I would argue that these, thank you, you can go ahead and pass that around. I would argue that this image is a kind of fantasy land itself. Specifically, you can see that in the kind of imagery of the sun and the clouds. So what this poster is doing is it's utilizing a discourse, a signifier that plays in Han Chinese culture, that is the peach and these other fruits, that doesn't really apply to ethnic minorities and doesn't appear in ethnic minority regions, but it does have some significance for Han Chinese. So this, I would argue this image is for the consumption of Han Chinese, and it has little to nothing to do with ethnic minorities other than the role that they play as characters. So I wanted to talk really quickly about some other oddly Arab elements to it. Besides the kind of rug here and the kind of 1001 Nights sort of imagery that the clouds evoke, there's this woman right here who appears in a very Arab, to be represented in a very Arabized way. These other these other characters are represented in fairly standard ethnic ways. So we have a Korean here, the Tibetan here, a Miao, or what we would call in the US a Hmong individual. Those all are fairly standard, but this image evokes a kind of Arabism that is rarely seen, at least in my studies of Chinese ethnic minorities, in terms of how they are, but in how they are represented, there are actually images of women represented in this highly Arabized way.
Do you really mean Arabic or do you mean Turkic?
Arabized, yeah. So this woman right here is from a film which was made, I believe, in 1957. It occurs on the northwest borders of China, and it is a spy romance thriller. And this woman is represented in a manner that's fairly similar to the woman here. And finally, I want to discuss one last point really quickly. I don't know if y'all can see this, but if you get the chance afterwards, come up and take a look at the faces of these individuals. What's fascinating is that they all have these highly emphasized epicanthic folds, and the epicanthic fold is, of course, a discourse. There's a discourse surrounding the epicanthic fold in the West about Asians, and Asians having a more pronounced epicanthic fold. What I would argue is going on here is that discourse has been incorporated into Chinese discourse, so they're borrowing this westernized discourse about Asianness and appropriating it to otherize their own ethnic others. So in the same way that the peach has absolutely nothing is not inherently related to these ethnic groups, the epicanthic fold is being used for a similar purpose. It's not actually related to ethnic groups, but it is used to otherize this group of people. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? I don't think the microphone is working. Okay. I'm going to project. Okay. The two posters I'm going to present now: Proletarians of the World Unite and Strive for the Liberation of the Nation, Defend the Independence of the Nation. These two posters will allow us to see the history of the Cultural Revolution and the Chinese Revolution in a global context. Okay, and so the Cultural Revolution wasn't an isolated event. It was a very part of the larger radical and revolutionary movements going on in the context of the global 60s. What defined the global 60s was the emergence of radicalism, revolutions, social and political movements on a global scale. Anti-colonial movements in the Third World, as well as social and political movements in very advanced capitalist societies, such as the United States, were all anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, and anti-racist in nature. So many of the African American and Asian American activists inspired by Maoism saw their national struggle for self-determination as part of a larger anti-imperialist third world internationalism. And Mao Zedong himself met with leaders of civil rights movement and openly stated his support for Black people's struggle against racial injustice and against US imperialism. And in terms of official foreign policy, as one of the newly independent and developing nations, China openly supported struggles, especially national liberation movements in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And we will see that message clearly conveyed in the second poster. But now let's direct our attention to the first one: Proletarians of the World, Unite. This poster expresses a proletarian internationalism that was and has been a key component of orthodox Marxism, as well as organizing principles for many Labor Party and socialist parties. And what we have here are people of different nationalities, of different ethnicities and races, holding hands together, singing L'Internationale, the International, and the various tools they hold in hand sort of make clear their identity as workers and proletarians. And the weapons, guns, of course, indicate a valorization of militancy. That was a key notion in Maoist thought. And they are gathering beside a red flag inscribed Commune de Paris, the Paris Commune. The Paris Commune was the first successful workers' revolution that only existed for about 2 months in 1871, before brutally suppressed by the French government. And it created the first workers' government in human history. And thus, Commune de Paris would carry a forever political significance for workers and proletarian revolutions throughout the world. And all these figures, they are singing and gazing beyond the diegetic world created by the poster. And a film scholar, and we see quite a lot of this type of gazing in all in some of the posters on display here. And this type of gaze, a film scholar termed it the socialist realist gaze. What a socialist realist gaze does is it looks toward a future. It points to a better future. It is utopian in nature. And those figures, they've looked at the ideological truth. They have reached ideological perfection. And that is why we as audience should aspire to do the same. And that is the ideological and aesthetic function of a realist, socialist realist gaze, okay? And if we turn our attention to the second poster, strive for the liberation of the nation, defend the independence of the nation. This originally came from a painting. The original medium is a painting, and it's highly romantic because there seems to be light emanating from the red flag, another symbol of the just socialist cause. And the backdrop is very much blurred and abstracted, very rosy and bright in terms of color, and you see a sea of more red flags. What occupies the foreground are three arms racially distinct, clenched in fists, and one holding a gun, again, valorizes militancy and evokes Mao's famous articulation that power comes from the barrel of a gun. And one holding a hammer, again, celebrates labor and the proletariat. And one in shackles, and that is obviously African or African-American. And we almost notice somehow a stereotypical representation of the black body, not only going on in this poster, but some other posters, that it is always the black body that is in shackles. And also in terms of style, this poster / painting is incredibly painterly, meaning there are visible brush strokes, and as opposed to a very smooth and plastic form and style. And this roughness is also very masculine, and it creates this texture of roughness that really highlights the strength and power of the oppressed people striving for independence. And all of this very highly aestheticized style really attests to the consummate technical skills as well as conscious aesthetic choices on the part of the artist who created this poster, Qian Daxing. He was one of the most influential and creative and productive poster designers and artists of that time. And that would be all of my presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
Should I still hold on to this? Hi. So fast forward to today, I'm going to talk about a couple of contemporary pieces, one of which is right here in this case. So if you want to gather around it, and you can come and take a closer look if you like. So after Mao's death and the end of the Cultural Revolution, Deng Xiaoping took power, became the de facto leader, and then in an attempt to modernize China's economy and revitalize the industry, he announced a new policy in December of 1978 called 改革开放, which means opening and reform. Which welcomed foreign businesses to come into China to set up. So this would eventually lead to China's status as the world's factory. So this open door policy allowed a lot of artists to really experiment freely, and especially conceptual artists and installation artists. So the 1980s was considered the most experimental period in contemporary Chinese history. But after the June 4th Tiananmen incident in 1989, Chinese authorities placed strict policies on art activities and ban installation art. So a lot of artists were not able to show their work in museums, and they were shut out of the public sphere. So that gave a lot of artists a hard time. They couldn't make money, and they were struggling, didn't have places to show their work. So some of them ended up actually leaving the country to go abroad to pursue better opportunities. But it was also during this decade when Chinese artists began to show more outside of China, and so the interest in contemporary Chinese art began to grow. So by the early 2000s, China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. And by that time, government restrictions on art activities started to loosen. So a lot of artists were again allowed to show in museums, and galleries started popping up in China. And there were more opportunities for artists in their homeland. And that was the time when people could see that, well, contemporary Chinese art is really gaining popularity. It's also a way to kind of affirm and assert their national identity and to establish their place as a major power in the world. So the image of Mao is inextricably tied to the Cultural Revolution and its ideology, and having been mass-produced in posters and paraphernalia during the Cultural Revolution period, the Mao's likeness and his name really permeated the culture and daily lives of the people. But today, we can also find his image in a lot of the pieces that contemporary Chinese artists are making. So I'm going to talk about Ma Han's piece first, right in front of you. So I think the great thing about contemporary art is, especially compared to the posters that you all just saw, which had very specific meanings attached to each symbol. Contemporary art is more open to interpretation, and I feel that sometimes I'll just come up here and quietly observe and spy on people as they view the art, and it's interesting to hear their conversations with each other. What do you think this means? And it's really interesting to have so many different answers, especially from people who've actually gone through this period of time, and people who know maybe not too much about it. So you get really a variety of interpretation. And Ma Han, he is of the younger generation of Chinese contemporary artists. He was born in 1965 in Hunan, China. And he actually studied oil painting first, but ended up doing work in a variety of media, including sculpture, photography, installation art, and also performance art. So he's well versed in a variety of media. So this piece here, he's using Mao's image, so a very iconic motif seen in a lot of Cultural Revolution art. But you know, the meaning now is open up to interpretation, especially with this abstract bulbous form coming out of his mouth. Many may wonder what that means. Upon closer examination, you can see little tiny figures all over it, and little grains of rice as well. So it's interesting that he's taking the image of Mao, this icon, and also thinking about the instructions to artists during the Cultural Revolution to create pieces that were red, bright, and shining. So he's also reflected that in this piece here. But then it's kind of a way, he did this in a humorous way as well, because of the juxtaposition of the scale of Mao and the tiny little figurines. Mao is very enlarged, and the people are very small. And also, it has a kind of kitschy quality because of the way he uses the material. Those are kind of like toy figurines, and it's a fiberglass coated in a sort of paint used in automobiles. So it's very different. It's from the pieces that you just saw. It doesn't have that kind of reverence quality to it, but and you can also look at it from a more critical view, which is to look at how Mao has become this godlike figure, and the people kind of look like ants on an anthill, kind of like struggling to survive, carrying bags of rice. It may sort of reference the famines and the death of a lot of people in the pre-Cultural Revolution times of the Great Leap Forward. So there are layers of meaning one can mine from this piece, and kind of thinking about it in the context of history and looking at what's going on in China now with the economic boom and lots of changes happening in cities. So Mahan also loves using just like everyday things that he can find, whether in his home or studio or on his way to his studio. So he would sometimes pick up debris and use that in his work. And I kind of just imagine him one day walk into his kitchen and just like picking up a handful of rice and like using that to create art. So it kind of has this idea of like an explosion as well, how the little figurines are coming out of Mao's mouth. So I also want to talk about another contemporary piece which also uses repetition and the image, or actually the words of Mao in his work. So let's move this way over here. So Jin Yi is also an artist born in the 60s, so in 1965 in Kaohsiung in Taiwan. So he actually moved around a lot, moved to Hong Kong when he was younger, and actually ended up attending university there. And he first majored in biochemistry, but during his second year, he took an art elective class with Liu Guosong, who was one of the co-founders of the Fifth Moon Group, famously for exhorting young artists to discard the brush of the literati and just instead to experiment and come up with your own ways of making art. So Jin Yi took Liu Guosong's class as a person that's never taken a formal art class before, but became the star student, and Liu Guosong convinced him and his parents to have Jin Yi transferred to become an art major instead. So that was a turning point in his life where he just decided to make art because that's really what he loved, but couldn't pursue it first because his family was worried about him not making enough money as an artist. So eventually he went into art, and for his graduation work, he came up with this unique technique, which is inspired by the stone stele ink rubbings, which had commemorative inscriptions on them. So how they made these rubbings on these old stone steles was to take a piece of paper and to dampen it, and to carefully use a brush to work the paper into kind of the inscriptions. So all the parts that are inscribed, so that there's a surface, and then there's the depression where the paper goes into. So after the paper's drying, you would take an ink pad to kind of like lightly pat it so that the characters would appear white on a black background. So Jin Yi takes his inspiration from the ink rubbings and kind of devises his own technique of using these cork stamps that he makes himself. So they're kind of like the carved seals that one would stamped with their names to on paintings, traditional ink paintings. And so he's used that here and made his own tool. And it's kind of actually like printmaking as well as a painting, even though he does use ink. So he's got Mao Zedong, like the individual characters of Mao Zedong's name, on every single square here, but they are placed sideways, upside down, and you cannot really tell upon when after you until you come up and take a closer look. So from afar, it looks like just a photorealistic landscape painting, but when you come closer, you can see Mao Zedong's name all over. So this landscape is supposed to depict Hunan, the mountains of Hunan, which was where Mao Zedong was born, and to impose his name all over it kind of suggests this uniformity that you see from looking at this piece from afar. And there's kind of this unrest or disorganization kind of underneath when you come closer and then see all the characters being placed upside down and sideways. So Li Jinyi really wanted to stick with the roots of Chinese painting, but then also to create a new way of Chinese painting. So he's not letting go of his tradition, but also coming up with innovative ways to continue on the tradition. Thank you.
I'm really interested in this poster because it has a lot of components that juxtaposition in this poster, and the title is "Long Live Chairman Mao." It represents the masses' best wishes for Mao, and we can maybe I can introduce just from the both sides of the red flags. The points forward, and it represents the Chairman Mao's leadership, and also we can see there are a lot of motifs and symbols, and there are architectures like the Tiananmen. Tiananmen is a very ancient traditional Chinese architecture, and it was first built in Ming Dynasty in 15th century, and it's as an international symbol of China now. And also the right one is the Jinggang Mountains. It was regarded as the birthplace of the Chinese Red Army, and the left one is the Yan'an. Yan'an also represents the birthplace of the of the revolution. And also we can see a lot of sunflowers under there, and they're just like to forward the sun, and the Chairman Mao represents the sun, and there are 3 essays wrote by Chairman Mao, and there as a whole group of the called Old 3 essays. And the left one is to commemorating Bassoon. Bassoon is a Canadian physician, and he and Chairman Mao just to represent his selfless commitment to the help of Chinese people. And the middle essay is to serve the people, and Chairman Mao just calls on the Communist Party to serve the people. And the right essay is the old man moving the mountains, and it's the Chairman Mao's goal to lead the Chinese people and to lead the Communist Party to lead to a very bright future. And also we can see the bottom of this is a slogan of "Long Live Chairman Mao" is in the Chinese characters, and so there are whole components to present the people's very best wishes for Chairman Mao. So that's it. Thank you.